In the Fuzzy Memories podcast, we celebrate the good, the rad, and the fugly of the 80s and 90s.
We're three latchkey kids who made it out alive.
And in each episode, we break down all the culture that popped 1 year at a time.
Whether it's the birth of legends...
I'm Lyme disease free today, and I have Whitney Houston and MTV to thank. Or audacious moves.
Imagine also the poor Golden Gate Bridge. You turn 75 and people have a party on you.
Yep. I don't want that.
Or even confusing PSAs.
In the stop, drop, and roll. I mean, I assumed as an adult I would catch on fire weekly.
All the time!
We've got a take that will make you laugh.
We've also got thoughts on all sorts of random phenomena and the most unmitigated of golf.
Why sharks can't be trusted, people can't be trusted, and rivers can't be trusted. It's collusion.
It's of the highest degree.
Uh-huh.
You were counseling me to start my remarks with, first of all, bitch.
Everyone in that room would have snapped to attention.
It's going to be basically coffee lids, shark revenge, and then maybe like Matt Getz. God, we need to do something about him.
Join us every other Wednesday to celebrate the hits, the misses, and the misfits of the weirdest decades.
If I could tell my 14-year-old self from 1990 that I would be eating in a Cheesecake Factory in
Beverly Hills,
I'd be like, we did it. We did it, Joe.
We did it.
Listen and subscribe to Fuzzy Memories on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform. Hello, and welcome to Broads and Books, the podcast with one unique theme, 4 hand-picked book recommendations, and 2 broads. I'm Erin.
And I'm Amy, and this is a special Broads and Books bonus episode.
In our regular episodes on Wednesdays, we tell you about our favorite books based on different weekly themes. In every episode, you get one clear idea, though. Books are the best.
I like how you really clearly put those periods in that sentence.
Books are the best.
The freaking best. So we had a thought. Those authors that write the books that we love, they probably feel like books are the best too.
So we figured that we should ask them about it. And that's what this bonus series is all about.
Today on the Broads Talk Books With, we've got Mathieu Cailler. He is a writer of short stories, poetry, children's books, basically everything. I think he does everything.
He does.
It's really infuriating.
He's also hilarious, which you know we love. We had an incredible conversation about stand-up comedy, garage sales, and why poetry should be fun to read.
I mean, those 3 topics, I don't know why you wouldn't be interested. After hearing those 3, yes.
Exactly.
He's just a fantastic human being. I got to meet him in person a while back through one of our friends, the author Callie Vinbali, who Matthew says some very nice things about. We're linking to her too, so you can understand our love.
Get ready to find your favorite new writer and human, and see all of his recommendations in the show notes.
And now, here's our interview with Mathieu Cailler.
Hi, Matthew. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
This is
Oh my
very
gosh,
exciting.
yeah.
We were just talking. You're our first man.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know why I said it's so creepy, but it is.
I know, you might want to
Well, I've been listening, and I thought maybe due to the title that maybe, obviously I said, well, they haven't had a man from what I've heard, right?
Yeah,
So I said, maybe, I'll just continue to be a fan. That's fine. But that's what's the worst that could happen?
We have strict qualification criteria for
Okay.
men, and you passed them all.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Good on you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, and I met Amy at a bookstore long ago.
Sure did. Yeah.
And I remember it well. It was that Beaverdale Books or?
Yes.
That's right.
You and Callie.
That's right.
We love Callie so much.
Yes.
Callie's the best. I'm excited about her book coming out soon. So
Yes.
Yeah. We've been trying to think about how we want to bring her into
Yeah,
this, too,
incorporate that in.
without
'cause-
being, losing our integrity fully.
just fanning out. Yeah, we're really good friends. You need to buy this book. That's it. You can't
That's
listen to the
true.
show unless you buy
Yeah.
it is sad that when you're friends with someone, somehow the praise doesn't seem as valid, right?
Yeah.
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 I don't know how to kind of sidestep that, but it's something I've noticed too. I'll read a friend's book and then you promote it, and then people are like, "Oh, that person's just being kind. I'm a friend of his," or whatever. And it's like, no, I don't know. If I hated you, I would do the same thing. Like, I don't know Margaret Atwood or anything, but I feel like it's the same quality of book. Like, I don't know how to do that.
Isn't that imposter syndrome when you don't believe the praise that other people give you?
Maybe so. Well, and writers in general are fragile.
Yeah, that's true.
That is very true. Well, we will not be too harsh, hopefully. Your fragility.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so, since you've been listening and you're a fan, which
Yes.
Yeah.
You probably noticed that when we talk to authors, we have some questions about books, and we have some questions about, what you're reading now and some of your current obsessions. So what do you think? Do you have a favorite book that you particularly remember as a kid or as a teen?
Great question. Yeah, I have. Definitely, there are books that if I hadn't read, I wouldn't be writing, right? So there's the ones that kind of made you think I could do this. And for me, it was Gary Paulson. He's like a YA author, mostly geared towards young men, stories of adventure. There's the very famous Hatchet. There it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Hatchet and I think Hay Meadow were probably the first two books that I read in an entire sitting as a boy, and I didn't like to read very much. And I just remember time went really fast. It didn't feel like work. And I said, man, then when I got older, I said, how does someone write in a way that just pushes a story along without feeling like I'm reading? That was a very important thing for me to unpack, because I don't know if it was that I had trouble reading. I don't know if it was an attention span thing. But whenever I seemed to go to school, it came back, that daunting, oh, here's Ivanhoe. Go read 60 pages tonight for homework. And I was like, I just won't do this. Like, we'll see what happens tomorrow on the quiz, but I'm not going to do it. So, I from like a sentence level, I think that really started it in terms of, I think writers get sometimes kind of caught up in blowing people away with flash. And if you have a really good story, sometimes you just need to let the story do the work, put forth the good amount of details that kind of make the setting seem alive. But not so much that you're bogging down the reader with useless information. So that was something I thought about very much going forward. And then just, I've been teaching a short story class here in LA in recent weeks. So I've been doing lots of kind of going through my bookshelf and trying to find the best short stories. That it's such a gigantic medium in terms of style, right? Like it's very hard to teach this 5-week class I'm doing because of that. And you have, I love teaching Lydia Davis and Alice Munro, just because the styles are so different. And then more traditional short fiction like Chekhov or Richard Bausch or Grace Paley, Naguib Mahfouz, I think that's how you pronounce the name. So those are some of these authors, I just see them in print and then I go to say the name on a podcast and I'm like, oh God.
Welcome to every week.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. You're like, oh, I'm just going to ruin my whole life right now. But here we go. Yeah.
Pretty much. I love your book and I can't say your name. There
yes,
you go.
That happens all the time. Or you mispronounce someone's name for years and then someone else says it at a dinner table and you're like, oh, really?
Oh.
That's interesting. Yep. Is that how I think it was Neil Gaiman?
Oh,
what's his name?
Yeah.
I was mispronouncing that for like 15 years. And someone I went to eat a burrito with for lunch the other day, and they said it, and I said, "Is that how you pronounce his name?" They're like, "Yeah, I have his master class." Or whatever. I was like, "Oh, okay." I'm so glad that they just live on the shelf, and I don't have to do this.
That's terrific.
I'm sure people do the same with my name, so I feel like whatever, and I don't take it personally.
What's the worst you've heard your name mangled?
Oh, well, I did a radio show a few years ago that's probably my all-time favorite. So my name is pronounced Mathieu, like the apostle, and then and then Cailler, like Yippee Cailler. So I was in a studio for a radio show, and the host was very kind, and he went over the name a few times, and he said, "How do you pronounce it?" And I said, "Oh, okay, so it's Mathieu, and then Cailler, like Yippee Cailler." And he said it a few times. It was perfect. And then the show started 10 minutes later, and he says, "I'm here with Marcus Caller." What? Yeah. And I didn't know that I was on. So I was like, oh, he's taking a phone call. So I just was sitting 3 feet from him, like staring at the ground. And then he's like, Marcus, would you like to tell us about your new book? And I was like, he's doing like another person, like someone's calling in with another book named Marcus.
gosh.
So I didn't answer for like, I don't know, 55 seconds. And it really was weird. And then he was like, he's like waving at me. And I was like, oh yeah. And so for the whole show, then I was Marcus. And he's like, Marcus, how'd you get into poetry? It was really funny.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He just straight up blacked out during.
I think he had, just a moment, I don't know if he looked at the wrong notes. It was, we've all done it. But it was funny, and I didn't want to correct him. Like on the air, I was like, well, it's fine, whatever, we'll figure it out. But
Well, I like that he doubled down. Like no part where you weren't responding did he think, oh, wait, I might have the name wrong.
oh, yeah, and I
No,
totally
like-
was not responding. I was like, okay, I'm going to be really good. I'm not used to doing a ton of radio, and so I'm not going to jump down someone who's named Marcus. Like, just let this Marcus person speak. I'll wait till they call on me. So I was very impressed with my, I was trying to be on my best behavior, which made it even worse.
Yeah. I blame him. I don't know. He had a full 55 seconds to
Yeah, he did. And he went over it like
Hey.
8 times. I was like, wow, he knows it really well.
And I could maybe give him the last name, but to get the first name wrong.
Yeah.
that's-
Yeah, I know. That's really what did it. If he had said Matthew Caller, I would have been totally on board because I've had that one most of my life,
Yeah.
But there's not even an R.
No. Well, French is really weird. We just got it's like decorative letters. Decorative letters. They're just, you know what? A P would look good here. Let's put one in. Yeah.
Yep.
They're
Perfect.
ornamental.
Yeah. Well, another thing that we've covered on the podcast a couple times is classics that we struggled with that maybe, had an effect on our early reading life.
Yeah.
Or we kind of wish they would have put something else in
Yes.
there. I feel like you have an answer.
I
Yeah.
do have I have many. Yeah, I think in general, especially with poetry, my most recent book is poetry. So I do like kind of look at people whenever I speak, they just say, oh, I hate poetry. That's a very common first reaction. And what I find more than anything else is that they have read a ton of high school poetry. And there's nothing wrong with, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, but it might not be the easiest way to introduce the subject. I feel like we kind of used, sonnets and things like that and Tennyson. And these are great tools for teaching, maybe at like an MFA level. But sometimes I think you need to garner someone's interest first. And so I think that applies to everything, right? Fiction, memoir, and all the things that you read in high school. So I remember like Dickens was really tough for me. A Tale of Two Cities was like, okay, well, I know and then there's also this societal pressure that you have to love it. So you feel very much like you can't speak on it, right? It's like a big movie, like a Tarantino film or whatever. Like you just watch it and then you're like, oh, if I didn't love it, I can't say it. Like I got to take that to the grave,
Right.
that maybe I don't love Pulp Fiction as much as everybody else or whatever it is.
Sounds like a very specific.
Yeah, that was very specific.
Well, that happened to me on this last movie that everyone was like going nuts. Did you watch that last film?
Yes.
Okay.
Not like it that much.
Oh, good.
Yes. And
Me neither.
You said that and I still watched it and I ended at the same place too.
Okay. Oh, all right. So we're like the only three we should get in like the witness protection program or something.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was watching it and I went with a group of women and that last scene where someone's like bashing the person's head into a phone for 30 minutes and everyone in the theater was laughing. And I was just like, is anyone else seeing someone just slam a woman's head into a phone for an hour and a half? But anyhow, so those are those moments where I felt like very much like Dickens for me I've appreciated him so much more now as an adult, but it was tough, getting through those books. I remember Ivanhoe was very tough for me. And I remember really wanting to love Jack London as a boy because it was kind of the similar themes explored as Gary Paulson. But he also was just bogged me down with a lot of things, then how to to build a fire, right? That's a very famous short story that I love now. But as a teenager that had to read it on like a Wednesday evening after soccer practice, I was like, seriously, is this guy just alone with a dog for 20 pages? That kind of thing. But then as a writer later, you get an appreciation for him breaking so many rules and saying, oh, I'm going to, all the things they tell writers not to do, to have your character be alone for too long, to have internal monologue, to have heavy description. He does all of them and pulls it off. So it's fun because I think that was probably a big part of his process was, I kind of want to try something new and try to do things that, maybe teachers or the establishment won't let you do. So,
But you're right. The fact that we show that stuff to young kids,
Ugh.
young boys,
Yeah.
who are reading it Wednesday night after soccer practice.
yes.
It's such a disservice.
Then,
Yeah.
like, we grow up thinking this is what it is to be literature. This is dry and it's hard and it's no wonder so many people are put off by that.
Yeah. It's true. And I think, I try to, when I'm teaching younger people, I try to always find things that are kind of current. There was an essay I taught recently by an author named Lindsay Hall, and she wrote an essay regarding like Instagram stalking and kind of, and it was really cool. It's like kind of her developing feelings for someone based on like, I think an initial impression and then following this person on Instagram. It was felt very current and relevant and soulful and honest, all those things. And it's also humorous. So when I read that for like a young essay class, and everyone's like into it and can relate and has a lot of things they can share, it at least allows you to gather and garner people's interest enough to then maybe try to tackle a bigger, like an old classic or something. They'll like kind of, it's almost like that Hollywood thing, like one for you, one for me kind of thing a little bit, where it's like, if you really are hell bent on teaching Ivanhoe, like maybe you got to like get them to really buy in and then teach it in a different way. I wouldn't even teach Ivanhoe. I would probably just say like, hey, we're moving on,
That's a bad instinct. If you have the instinct to teach Ivanhoe, I think you need a couple days off.
I think so. I think so. I don't see them teaching it any longer. Yeah.
No. Every time you say it, I get an icky reaction.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
But I love kind of teaching I think Jenny Slate has a book out right now.
Yes.
What is it, like Little Weird Things or Little Weirdos? Little Weirds. I loved that. It's such a beautiful looking book. It's such a beautiful book. So I taught that in a class recently, and you just get people interested in writing. And I think the biggest thing for me is if they come away saying like, oh, I didn't know you could write like that. I didn't know that was a form of writing, because I felt that way when I was 15 and I finally read Bukowski. I grew up down the street from him practically here in San Pedro. I used to see him as a little boy. Yeah, he lived about 3 blocks from my grandfather, and we would walk right by his house. And my grandfather would say, oh, a famous writer lives there. And I would see this guy smoking cigarettes with like his shirt off, watering the lawn, an older guy. And I was like, there's no way. Like, I'm an astronaut, like whatever. Okay. Yeah. And then later in life, I saw his face on like the back of a book jacket, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's the guy from from Santa Cruz Street in San Pedro." Yeah, and it was, and so.
So did you immediately take off your shirt, smoke a cigarette?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of like instincts where I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know you could write like this. I didn't know you could write about the track and about the prostitutes of Los Angeles." And it was really like, captivating. I later learned a lot about Bukowski and was like, oh, maybe he's not like the most like lovely figure in some ways, right? But I remember just feeling like, oh, I can write like this, in the sense that I can say like, oh, I've had a shitty day or whatever. That was like sometimes his opening sentence. And you just felt like if he were in a high school English class, he would have been destroyed. So that was encouraging for me to be like, oh, writing can look it's so diverse in style and everything, right? And in plot, and it doesn't have to look a certain way.
So you mentioned Hatchet and you mentioned Bukowski as two books and people that kind of encouraged you to be a writer. Any others that you remember, like a real sort of big reaction to when you were younger?
Let's see. So for me, I kind of got into writing a little bit later than most people. I didn't study it too much in college. I just took one creative writing class. I kind of came to it through like journalism. I wrote in newspaper in college and was mostly writing comedy. So I did a lot of stand-up comedy. And I was really obsessed with like Gilda Radner.
Yeah.
And let's see, like Bill Murray and Eddie Murphy's specials, and even like Ellen DeGeneres. Her early work was very important to me. And she wrote like, I think, she broke into comedy by writing, like her girlfriend had died. Yeah.
Oh my God, the Dear God.
Yes, exactly. And and so I remember reading that as a maybe like 18-year-old and just thinking how brilliant it was, and kind of seeing comedy as more of storytelling. So that was a big influence. I think it wasn't just, writing and writers. I think, later on, then I was always influenced by more like traditional writing, very much a Chekhov, Hemingway, that kind of thing. Even Lucille Clifton for poetry, I always look at her work very much. And so it was an interesting kind of evolution because I started doing jokes and writing jokes. And then later I was just like, oh, I kind of need the blank page to tell sad stories. No one wants to go up on stage and hear someone tell a really depressing story for 30 minutes. That's not what stand-up's about. True. So it started kind of taking shape in terms of poetry and short fiction. And then, yeah, it was just kind of a natural evolution. But I think without comedy, without that, I don't think I'm writing. It's a weird journey.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah. You have to have like a couple standout memories from being a stand-up.
Oh, they're horrible.
Immediately.
Yeah. Well, there's a short story I wrote where it's very much my kind of, it's mostly an autobiographical short story. It's called One Night Stand, and it's in my first short story collection, and it is very much, like an open mic and people singing, Simon and Garfunkel songs opening up for you. And there was like a woman in the corner holding flashlights as a spotlight and like putting them on your face. And it was like really hard to perform. And everyone was, and I remember this guy who was like, oh, you're sweaty. I have what you don't want to do is sweat because then the audience, and I was like very stressed out. And so he said, I just use my wife's this is so odd, but I use my wife's like maxi pads and I put them under my t-shirt and that absorbs sweat. And I was like, oh, okay, like I don't know if I can do that, like, right. And then
worst advice out of the gate.
Yes.
Terrible advice.
And then I told a friend and she was like, oh, I'll sew socks into your t-shirt for you. And I was like, okay. And so then I was having a friend do that. And then I just had lots of like stupid jokes. You try to be, you're basically doing an impression of other comics when you're up there because you've never done anything. So I was watching Rodney Dangerfield a lot when I was a kid with my grandfather. And I just like came home and when you're like 12, 13 years old, you have not been married 4 times and you don't have all this experience like Dangerfield. So I was trying to write like him. And so I wrote a joke about, a stork. Like I said, oh, my father tells me children come from storks that have had sex with my mother. And I was like, oh God, that's not really appropriate, But I remember writing that joke at 14 thinking it was like so brilliant. And then I got up on stage and was like, oh, that's not brilliant at all. It's offensive and gross. And my poor mom. Yeah. So, those are those moments where you're almost like an actor. You're just trying out material that's not even yours. And it's so painful. Like when you fail up there, it's so painful because your writing is so much more lovely that way. Because your first draft it's just you and a computer and no one sees it. And your first draft with stand-up comedy is just, oh my gosh, it's in front of everyone. And then you're really.
Yeah, I am getting sweaty. I need t-shirt socks.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
T-shirt socks.
Maybe we do need that for Sundays. We talk about how we get this is too much information.
No, when we record, we get like super sweaty.
Yeah, for some reason.
So then we thought about because we have a live show coming up, and like, what are we going to do when we're sweating through our clothes? You've given us
now we've got.
Oh, good, good, yeah.
T-shirt socks.
They do work. I did another. I mean, it's like you can't really wear the T-shirt anywhere else but performing because you look a little weird and it's itchy. But
it's itchy
for those 15 minutes that you need the shirt. Yeah, it works okay.
Yeah, I just imagine us like our arms out, just stuck because we don't want to touch. Like, sorry, my itchy.
Yes, yeah, you kind of end up like your arms kind of poke out like you're a bird or something a little bit.
Oh man, that was great. That visual was everything I needed.
Oh, good. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, those are days that now I think back and I took all my material that was really poor and kind of put it in a struggling stand-up comic story. About him performing at an open mic and like trying to get this person's attention. I kind of upped the stakes by having like a manager come in, like this guy has a connection and a manager is coming in to hear his set and it goes kind of poorly and that whole vibe. But it was kind of a fun place for me. It was cathartic to like dump all my old material in this story where I knew the comic was going to fail, so the material didn't have to be great. It was actually better when it didn't. The stork joke did not make it in there because I think that you're like maybe the first people I've ever told about that story. You and the poor crowd that had to be there. So, you know.
I feel special.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I remember being really proud and showing it to my grandfather, and he's like, "Oh, that's a good joke," and I was like, "That means a lot." And then I took it on the road, and that was a mistake.
Oh, well, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some of your reading life now.
Yeah.
How many books would you say are on your to be read pile? And
oh my gosh!
You can...
And are there any that you're really looking forward to that you can share?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a huge to be read pile as usual with everybody. I think yes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I'm trying to think of some of the more obvious ones. I have this book called Guys Like Me by Dominique Fabre, a French book that's supposed to be very good. And then I have this this memoir / I think a little bit of a biography about Elspeth Beard, who was the first woman to motorcycle all over the world and like ride one around the whole world. So I'm looking forward to that one. I have the short stories of Fitzgerald. We were talking about like classics. I have not read most of his short stories, maybe a good like 8 or 9, but that's it. So I wanted to kind of clear up a little bit of those blind spots.
Excellent.
And let's see, another one I have some David Mamet short plays I wanted to read.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then there was one other book that I really wanted to read. I think it's by, it's called Educated. I think it's a big memoir that's out right now.
Oh, yeah, we both read that. Yeah.
Oh, how is that? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know the author, but I know it's on my nightstand and someone bought.
Westover.
Okay, yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So those are.
It's a big book, but it'll go fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tough stuff, but it's good.
Yeah, it sounded fascinating. So.
Yeah, it is.
Well, of the books that you have gotten to, have you found any books that have really surprised you recently?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So I found this book in a weird way. I love basketball, and someone recommended this book called Sacred Hoops by Phil Jackson, the old Bulls coach, and he coached the Lakers. Yeah, and he had been like known as the Zen master throughout his life because he liked to practice Buddhism and things like that. But I just thought it was kind of a cute little nickname. I didn't realize that it was far more important. And it's kind of his memoir about basketball and faith and how he grew up in a Pentecostal church. But when he had to do I forgot what it's called, but basically there's a time of like reckoning when you're 13 and many of the young boys and girls are asked to kind of speak in tongues and feel like possessed by the Spirit. And yeah, and he couldn't do it. Like he went up there and he had really put in the work and it like didn't come to him. And then he tried for a whole nother year and still couldn't do it. And it kind of ruined his relationship with faith a little bit at that moment and a little bit with his parents. Like because they were both Pentecostal ministers, his folks.
Oh,
and
wow.
So he became kind of in search of a religion that more fit him and turned to Buddhism and the spirituality he was saying that, Pentecostal faith is based mostly on thinking about the future and like, am I being good enough now for heaven or whatever it might be? And he really loved the immediacy of Buddhism in the sense that it was focusing on now. And he felt there was like something really beautiful about that. And he would he would meditate and travel, and he became very close with like Native American faith. So he became kind of a student of faith and taught at different camps all over Montana. He's from North Dakota originally, and then he would teach in the summertime. He would teach basketball to many Native American tribes and communities in Montana and I think Wyoming and things like that. So it was a very interesting journey. I thought it was going to be more basketball focused. And I was excited to read about like the 90s Bulls and all that stuff and get kind of an interesting take on it. But it ended up being so much more. He's such an interesting writer and good writer. So that was a really fun book that I was very surprised about, And I have his like autobiography called Maverick that I bought. So that one's sitting on the table too.
Wow, I had no idea Phil Jackson had such a...
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Me neither. It was amazing. I was like promoting his book and my mom was like, oh, I have to read that. And I was like, yeah, it's really, engrossing and interesting. And I think sadly, sometimes we just see people, as like the star in their, in their field. It's a hard thing to break out of, especially.
In sports.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's very true.
How do you normally find your book recommendations? Do you get them from other people?
Oh,
word of
yeah.
mouth?
Yeah, I think word of mouth is huge. I think Instagram, Facebook now has become kind of a form of word of mouth. I like when people post what they're reading, what they're enjoying. Amazon and all those sites like Barnes and Nobles, they do a good job of kind of recommending things based on your purchase history. And I have bumped into a bunch of authors that way. But I think for me, like what started it all was garage sales. I don't know how. Yeah,
It's amazing.
I love garage sales.
Yeah.
And
Like the most random.
you do. And so I go to estate sales and garage sales often, maybe weekly. And I look them up in the paper still. And I go, and if they say books in there, I usually really enjoy it. And I'll go and kind of like sift through someone's collection and find something I enjoy. That was actually how I found Bukowski back in the day. My grandfather had told me, and I thought my grandfather was being silly as usual. And then when I was about 16, 15, I went to a garage sale with my mother and found this box of books that was all like 80% Bukowski. And I didn't know who he was. I thought like basically I discovered him, besides my grandfather. I was like, oh, this is our little secret. It's the guy down the street. How funny. And that was it, So yes, exactly. I was like, oh, look at, and so I saw like 12 of his books and I bought the box and I went home and read pretty much, I don't know, I think he probably has about 30 books. But I felt like in that moment that I read a good amount of his work and I could comment on it seriously and all that stuff. And but I love garage sales because you're going into someone's home or garage and you're kind of just delving into their tastes. And I have found so many interesting books that way. I was introduced to Garrison Keillor that way. Because people, that's like, it's like their big bookshelves that they're getting rid of. So, I was introduced to Baudelaire and Henry Miller. All that stuff was through that because they're adult books that they're not teaching in school.
Yep.
Yeah.
No one, I would.
So cool. It feels like going into like a record store or something.
It kind of does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good analogy. I didn't think of it that
Thank
way.
you, Erin.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so thinking about the works that you write, you write poetry, you write prose. Your most recent collection is out now. Do you think there were any books in particular that inspired this collection in some of your work? Were there any that you were thinking about a lot as you were pulling this together?
Oh, yes. So the author Bridget, see, I'm going to do it again because I've never said her name. Bridget Pegeen Kelly was a poet that I've followed for a long time and just adored her poems. Jim Harrison was a poet that I really admire. He's kind of a Bukowski-ish type poet. And let's see, like there are a few that I just absolutely love, like, Baudelaire. He has a poem in the book about him. Lucille Clifton, I mentioned. And then I think Raymond Carver's poetry always has touched me, and it's been very, very much, maybe not on the like image level that I'm trying to portray, but certainly on like a sentence level. I think he does something that poets are often afraid to do, which is speak very honestly. And, I think there's a little bit of this thing in art where people hide behind big words sometimes, or images that are hard to understand, or, and there's a little bit in the poetry community, kind of a pat on the back for confusion. I feel like, it's like, oh, I didn't understand it is a compliment. And I'm like, I don't see it that way. If everyone reads Ezra Pound, to like a high school class, I read one about him in the Paris Metro. Like 85% of the class was like, I don't get it. And we had to break it down. And then afterwards, everyone's like, oh, I appreciate it so much more. I'm like, that's a shame that you can't just appreciate it the first read in some ways, right?
Yeah.
This wasn't written in like 1487. This was like pretty contemporary stuff. So there is a little bit of that, simplicity to me. I think it was Da Vinci who said simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I'm very much a believer of that, like distilling words and trying to come up with an image that is accessible. I think to me the highest compliment is when people say, oh, I don't really like poetry, but I really liked your poems.
For sure. I think you're right that accessibility is something.
It's something, yes. clarity and accessibility to me. I mean, when I teach writing, I say above all else, like be clear, that will carry a reader, because confusion makes people want to close a book. There's we don't owe it, as a reader, you don't really owe it to anybody to keep reading unless it's for, like a class, but at this point when we're adults and we just want to read for fun, we're not going to, I tried to read Infinite Jest, for example, like 3 or 4 times now.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. And I kind of just enjoy it almost like a poem now. I read a whole page and I'm like, oh, that's really brilliant. I think there's a 10-page part about him building a bed or something at some point. And I'm just like, I can't do it anymore. Like I want to.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know, but I think that's hard. We've talked about that a lot too. As a reader, I mean, there'll be times that we both think, gosh, this book got a lot of praise, but I don't think I like it. Yeah, am I missing?
Yeah.
You're almost afraid to say you don't like it. I always feel like I have to Google and be like, did other people not like it? Am I not getting something? Yeah.
Yeah, because you feel like you're going to be, it's the Tarantino thing. Yeah, you're going to be attacked and then you have to defend yourself. But, art is one of those things, like you kind of feel it or you don't. And it makes me really happy when I'm able to read 8 or 9 poems by Carver, or even like Baudelaire, sometimes like even the more fancy, like Shakespearean sonnets. But I kind of understand them and can appreciate them. Elizabeth Barrett Browning now I really love, and like Sylvia Plath, obviously, right? Those were all, and Sexton was a big influence actually in this book. So, I think I love accessibility. I think there's like 2 types of writing, really. It's those that really want you to read and kind of welcome you in, like a Mary Oliver. And then there are others where you're like, oh God, do they even want me here? Or do I need to go to have a tweed blazer and a pipe? And, would this person even invite me into their home?
Right.
Yeah.
I would not be allowed.
I would not be allowed. Yeah.
Would your tweed blazer have socks in the armpits?
Oh, yes. Maybe. Blazers are thick enough you can get away with it, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
If you're sweating through a blazer, you have to go to a doctor, I think. Yeah.
Which, maybe.
Yeah.
I just realized not only are you our first man on the
Your emphasis on that is,
but also you're our first poet.
yeah.
Oh,
that's
good.
true.
Yeah, that's true. For the ones I that's true. Good point. Yeah.
That's
Oh my God,
very
you're
good.
just-
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. My goodness.
Okay, well,
After the stork joke, I'm maybe you're regretting everything. There's a good.
Nope. We love a bad joke.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Well, we have taken asking kind of 5 questions at the end to all the authors. And the first one is that we would like to know one of your most memorable fan interactions.
Besides meeting me.
Yeah,
yes.
obviously besides Amy, but whether it was funny,
Yeah.
weird, exciting.
I've had a couple. So I had one where the guy in the audience really thought I had written the story about him, that it was his life. And he was like very touched. It was a story about a man who, it's a very short piece in Los Angeles, my first collection. And it's about this man who goes back to the older man that he loved when he first came out of the closet, but they never were physical or anything. And then he learns that the older man has AIDS and is maybe dying any day. And so he visits him and they kind of, chat and that kind of thing. It's a very short little piece. And this man in the audience really thought it was about him. And it was really kind of a beautiful moment. He gave me a hug and said it like really touched him because something like so similar happened to him. So that was a really powerful one.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And then I had like a kind of a large following with my first book. I don't know how this happened with really older women. And I think it's because women are the only people who read. This is my guess. Like, I don't know a lot of men who are reading these days as much. So like most book clubs I've done, it's about 80% women, I would say. And then events. And I think that's, kind of an indicator of men needing to be better and read and all that stuff. That's for maybe another show. But so there was one man in the audience, right? It's like 90% women. And then this one man, he's probably about 50. He comes up after and he said, my wife is a huge fan. And I said, oh, okay. Do you want me to sign the book to her? And he said, yeah, that would be good. And so he hands me the book and I said, okay, so who should I make it out to? And he said, Carl. And I said, oh, okay, Carl. So are you sneaking in here on her behalf? And he said, no, I actually just kind of liked the book, but we'll keep it between us. And I was like, okay, you don't have to be embarrassed to read fiction, but yeah.
And also, that's kind of a backhanded.
It was a little weird, right? But it was kind of cute just the way he said Carl. It was very cute. Like,
maybe he had a crush on you too.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. It was like this real, like we were in some sinister, sex ring or something. And I said, it's like 10:30 in the morning at a library. Like, it's all good. You can be proud to be here. There's nothing shameful.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's terrifying and impressive every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that question.
Okay, so of the authors that you have loved reading and have appreciated their work, were there any that you really wanted to meet and you did meet and it went well?
Oh, yes. So I don't know if it counts as meeting, but I did share an elevator ride with Tess Gallagher. Does that count? Yeah. So that was kind of nice. And then I saw Elizabeth Gilbert at a conference, and she was very kind. And I did say hello, and she said hi, and I said I was a big fan, and she was very sweet. Like, she was almost embarrassed that I said it. So that was really nice, and she was very charming. And that's always nice when you meet people you admire and they actually stand up to what you've thought of them. Yeah, I think that would be. So I think those two things. Yeah, but I need more stories on that level, I think, But it is crazy to be and it is crazy to be friends with someone like Cailler that I really did, we went to college together, and she was kind of everything I wanted to be. She was someone.
You went to undergrad too?
No, I went to Vermont College with her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she, we became quick friends probably within the first 10 days or so. And we were kind of just bonding over our love of whiskey and late night snacks and like everything that wasn't writing, which I liked. We talked about her kids, and it was a lot of fun. And then I just ended up really admiring her. She's a tough person to compliment that way because she diffuses it. So I kind of like that I can do it without having her on the other end. But because she'll listen to this and turn it off when I start talking to this part.
Yeah.
But I just remember thinking, like, she's very humble, and she's put in the work, and she's won awards, and she was very much the writer. I was 25 at the time, and I remember thinking, like, wow, I would really like to be like Cailler. I would really like to have a book out and be like a normal, nice person, and that kind of she was very much, it was cool to see someone that I wanted to be. I didn't know what a writer looked like. I hadn't really met any. I didn't grow up with writers around. I still am not friends with that many writers here in LA, maybe 2 or 3. But most of my friends, I grew up in LA, and they're just like, they're not into writing. They're not into reading even. And It's kind of nice that way because I kind of can live my life, and it's, they're good people, and we watch basketball and we hang out, and, but Cailler was kind of the first writer. And I just looked at her and said, like, wow, okay, I'm going to try to do what she does. I'm going to read what she reads. And, it really helped me,
Yeah.
And now to be friends with her and also be like a huge fan, it's a very weird experience to like go to her house and hang out with her kids, like that kind of stuff. And like her husband and me, we watch like games together. It's just a very weird experience.
How would you say your love or joy of reading has changed since you became a published writer?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. I think for me, it's impossible to kind of turn off that critical aspect a little bit. And I'm always looking at plot and how characters are being manipulated and how things are being set up down the road. It has kind of, I have to say, it's kind of killed a lot of the pure joy. You'll never be able to read the same way. And even watch a film the same way. Sometimes I find myself in the evening, I don't want to watch a movie because it feels like work a little bit. I don't know how to, if you write all day on plot, you're like, maybe I don't want to unwind with another plot. I think that's why I gravitate so much towards documentaries sometimes. It just feels like a different experience, and I'm not trying to find the plot as much. It's just like a true story, and they're just telling it factually. And same with reading. I think sometimes now I notice that I never read what I'm writing. So if I'm writing fiction, I'll be reading a biography, and if I'm writing poetry, I'll be reading kids' books, and I kind of just bounce around that way.
What's a book, maybe one of your favorites or something else, but what's a book that you think everyone should read?
Oh, Yeah, what is a book I think everyone should read? Besides a classic, you think something a little more undiscovered? Yeah, so I would say The Diary of Frida Kahlo was kind of a cool book for me. I loved that book. It kind of was so much about dreaming bigger than you can think. That was very important to me. I tend to do that too. I think I see my writing career a certain way. I see my prose to be geared a certain way. And so I kind of stay in a comfortable wheelhouse. And when I took a look at, her diary, it really opened up that she was always pushing herself into drawing things and painting things that maybe were more, she was always kind of pushing herself a little bit out of her comfort zone. I thought that was really cool. There's that David Bowie quote about the best place to be as an artist is like going out into the ocean. I'm going to butcher it, but you want to be like a little bit where you don't have footing anymore, a couple feet more into the water, so to speak. And I think there is a little bit of that. Like sometimes we tend to just stay on the shore, and the big projects can be a little daunting, so we don't tackle them. I know I've been guilty of that. Like, oh God, if I start this project, it might take me 2-3 years. And so I don't do it. And I did that with a recent novel that I just finished. And it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, writing that. So you need sometimes to push yourself into that zone.
Definitely.
And her book
we lost Amy for a minute because David Bowie.
David
Yeah.
Bowie. Oh,
that's
yeah.
her, like magic trigger.
Yeah.
So
I think.
I was like, oh, and Amy's out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's a powerful person. Yeah. I think that was a big loss for just not music, but everybody and art in general.
Everything.
Yeah,
All creativity.
absolutely. And he was a huge reader. Like, huge reader. Yeah, people don't realize how much he was a reader. I think he read like 2 or 3 books a week is what I read in some of the obituaries. And he had a huge lifelong love affair with reading and poems. And
I've realized my Instagram has turned into a lot of David Bowie reading pictures, and I'm okay with
that's
that.
good. Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
seen other people's Instagrams? That's probably the best one. Yours, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Mine's all salads. I feel like people are just posting. Like everyone in my feed is posting salads. Sometimes I think they're ads, and I'm like, oh no, these are just people I know.
Oh,
Here's
boy.
farro salad. Here's an arugula salad. I'm like, I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah. Well, we always close our episode with our current pop culture obsession. So we wanted to ask about yours. What are you currently obsessed with, whether it's a TV show, podcast, movie, documentary, whatever?
So I've been really into this McMillions. Have you heard of this on HBO? Yeah. I've been watching that every Monday. It's 3 episodes in a row now. And I find myself coming home and excited to watch a kind of ridiculous documentary about McDonald's. Yeah, and it's like, it's so weird though, this whole thing about how I remember playing that Monopoly game and no one I ever knew won anything. And then,
Because that guy was
yes, and now I'm like, oh, I had no idea about this story until this came out. And yeah, so I have been watching that religiously. And I was kind of disappointed they didn't call the show Hamburglar. I felt like that was a really good opportunity.
That is.
Why did that's like I think about that at least once a week. Like
Now I'm gonna.
McMillions,
Yeah.
you really went there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's okay, but Hamburglar was right there. It was a layup, you know.
Yeah, they really fudged that.
Yeah. So, but it is kind of intriguing. Now the mob's involved in this last episode, and it's like really big crime, and it's weird that it's like has to do with fries and hash browns. It's just a very weird thing. It doesn't seem real.
It is.
And the FBI is involved, and you're like, you just can't believe it. So
Yeah.
I wish my grandfather were alive to know about this because he played this game religiously. And he was so irritated all the time. He's like, I eat 12 hash browns a day, and I can't win anything but a free hash brown. He's like, that's the only... He's like, this is so stupid. I wanted to win a Dodge Viper, and he keeps talking about it. And
Right.
yeah, and then I'm like, oh, I know who won the Dodge Viper. It's this guy in Florida,
Yeah.
and I know who won the million. Yeah, so there you go.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
Matthew.
Okay.
This was so fun.
This was a
Yes.
great time. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan.
That was so good.
It was so good.
It was actually a really fun conversation.
It was.
That we had.
It
with
was.
him.
That's what's so great about this series
Yes.
is some of the conversations are just amazing.
And some of the authors surprise us. Like,
Yes.
I had no idea that Matthew was as freaking funny.
So funny.
Yeah. And that he has a history in comedy.
Yes. And by the way, as a plug, you should follow his Twitter because his Twitter is actually very funny too.
Yeah.
Some of the things on there that I'm like, yes. And yeah, we didn't know prior to this that he has a history with stand-up comedy.
Yes.
Which
is fantastic.
it's so great.
The thing I love the most is maybe the idea of the maxi pads under the armpits.
Yeah, that was
which
terrific.
Is, seems real ill-advised.
Yeah.
But
I think
hey.
did we turn it into maxi? He had socks,
No,
right?
someone told him maxi
Oh,
pads.
yeah, that's
and
right.
He turned it into socks.
Yeah, in my head,
Yes.
it'll always be maxi pads.
You're
And then
right.
I didn't want to like rudely
Yeah,
say
yeah.
he did that, but that's right. He considered that.
Yeah.
So
And honestly, it may be something we need to consider.
Yeah,
because we
I-
sweat a lot.
I know. I
it's
mean,
just-
we might need to use it for Book Fest.
we might need to do that.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
No.
I also really liked that you kept emphasizing that this was our first man.
Yeah, I really felt like I needed to be like, you're a man.
And he went with it,
He went
which
with
is a
it.
testament to how great he is. Just man.
In fact, when we talked about doing this, he was like, I know you haven't interviewed any men. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's cool or not.
He thought we would say no,
Yeah,
but you're
which is
mistaken.
silly.
We would not say
No,
no.
we would not.
Not
So
to
that was wonderful. Even though I was super creepy, that was a great part of it.
To be fair, I did not remember it as creepy.
Oh, I remembered it as I was saying it. It's like, oh, Jesus, what am I doing? This is super creepy. Why am I doing this? And then I just did it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I also love that he talked about garage sales for finding books because
Yes.
how great is that? That's
And
so
now I
true.
feel like, yeah, I need to just drive around and find garage sales because there probably are some fantastic books.
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that his name was mangled so wonderfully in that talk show that he was on, to the point that he didn't know he was supposed to be talking.
I legitly have thought of that story
Yes.
so many times since we talked to him. Yeah. Marcus.
Which there's not an R anywhere in the name. I don't
Oh,
understand.
that is just bizarre
They're just
behavior.
adding weird letters.
Yeah.
Stop it.
And I mean, you got to love his love for Callie
Yes.
because we all love her too, but come on.
I love that basically Callie probably threw her phone away the minute that she started hearing him talk. Nice. Like, oh God, I can't handle it. Yeah. Well, Callie, too bad.
Too bad.
Gotta
go.
hear it. Gotta hear it. I love too that he really is thinking about like accessibility as well as writing excellence. That, you know, the idea of like writing poetry, it doesn't have to be confusing. It doesn't have to be
Yes.
like obtuse and some sort of, you know, literary kind of thing. He really wants to write poetry for everyone, which is really cool.
Very cool. And I mean, I'll say it because I don't know if you're avoiding it, but he quoted Bowie.
He did.
So
And my head about exploded.
I was here
like,
to witness that.
I was like, we're having a great conversation, and now you just put a Bowie quote in there.
You made her Bowie face come out.
Yeah.
And I saw it and I was like, oh boy. Oh boy. Here it is.
Well, we will be back next Wednesday with our regular weekly themed episodes. In the meantime, you can head to our website, broadsandbooks.com, and check out all of those episodes. And if you've missed any, now is the perfect time to get listening.
Like we said, this is a new series of bonus episodes we're providing. Have you caught them all? We've got Julia Phillips, Mona Watt, Chanel Benz, Angie Kim. More coming all the time.
Some great ones coming.
So many.
So subscribe now, and you will get them all direct to you.
Happy reading.
I'm up again. Same night, another dream. Before trying this recording thing, I didn't remember much of anything of these dreams. I didn't remember much from any of the women. And one night of doing this, and it's broken things open. The dreams they're in me, and they're coming out of me, and
Talk to me. I am not broken. I am the most whole, most real.
Cause their despair. I wait for the word. Witch. Look at the mad woman in her cage. She was a woman with holes inside her. That was the heaviest factor, the final evidence, the heart of the issue. Somehow, you understand this. You hear me. Wherever you are, whatever this is, you...
This isn't a dream journal anymore. It's not. It's just fact. Because now this is some sort of record. What are these dreams? Maybe there's a better question. Who are these women?
Weird Woman is a Broads and Books production. All 9 episodes are available January 10th. Listen and subscribe to Weird Woman on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform. That's WYRD Woman, wherever you listen to podcasts.